Welcome to Building Our City, the Quarry Story, and the 2Rivers Festival, which celebrates and appreciates the Speeds and Aramosa rivers here in Guelph. I'm Heather. I'm going to be the marshal for this event, and I am a steering committee member for the 2Rivers Festival. First and foremost, we want to have a great big thank you to the Guelph Wellington branch of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, and Susan and Leanne for getting this event together and being so incredibly flexible in moving it to an online space, and kind of creating an environment where we can all still gather but still physically distance. And of course, a big thank you to everyone who's joined us. I know it's an absolutely beautiful evening, but they've promised to provide us with a walking route to kind of replace the route that we were going to take later. So that's going to be a lovely 7 o'clock walk for us, I think. Every year, the 2Rivers Festival is organized and run by volunteers and involves a lot of different community organizations. They're truly the backbone of this festival, and without them, it wouldn't be possible. So again, thank you to Leanne and Susan, but as well to all of our amazing community organizations. And you can see all of them on our website at 2riversfestival.org, and I'm going to put that in the chat box right now. We also want to acknowledge and appreciate all of our advertisers, as well as our event sponsor, which this year is the Guelph Outdoors School. They are the financial backbone of the festival and help us get this off the ground every single year. So we absolutely encourage you to go onto our website and kind of check out our different advertisers, as well as our sponsor this year, because truly, without them, this festival wouldn't be what it is, and we wouldn't be able to promote it as effectively and have it grow from year to year. So that is incredibly meaningful to us. We have loads of amazing events remaining in May and June. So please have a look on our website to see kind of what interests you. And of course, this festival is a project of the Wellington Water Watchers. And it is our absolute hope that you fall in love with our rivers and take measures to protect and promote them, because truly, what is Guelph without our amazing 2Rivers and all of the legacy and culture and environment and history that goes along with it. And with that, I will introduce Leanne and Susan, and I'll hand it over to them to get this going. So Susan is the president of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, Guelph and Wellington branch. She is the site coordinator for Doors Open Guelph 2020, which unfortunately has been postponed for this year, but keep an eye out for that, because I'm sure it'll be an amazing event. She's been a walking tour guide for the Guelph Arts Council Historical Walking Tours for about 27 years. And is also, in her abundant spare time, apparently a part-time information services librarian at the Guelph Public Library. So apparently Susan happens to find about 20 more hours in her day than I do. So that is absolutely phenomenal. She also provides a lot of our really neat river facts and tidbits for the 2Rivers Festival. So I know that this talk is going to be amazing because she's such a wealth of knowledge. Our second co-host is Leanne Karen Piper. Leanne's interest in stone quarries comes from her early days living in Pusledge Township, where gravel pits ruled the world, still do to an extent. She has an undergraduate degree in history and English from McMaster and an MA from the University of Guelph. She's a former chair of Heritage Guelph and was actively involved in designating numerous stone buildings with the city of Guelph. She works in housing at the University of Guelph and moonlights as a city councillor representing Ward 5. Again, abundant spare time, clearly. She has such a soft spot for stone construction that she bought a 2-story house on Waterloo Avenue a few years ago with her fiance and is restoring it to its former glory. And I'm sure she'll have lots to say about that later. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Leanne and Susan.
Great, thank you very much, Heather. I want to add to the narrative that everything I know, I learned from Susan. So we'll give
Such apostrophes, Leanne.
all credit for the source. I am going to start by sharing the screen. We have a slideshow that we've prepared for this talk, and much of it is visual, so you're going to lose seeing our faces, but you're going to get to look at some amazing slides and historical photos instead. So we'll get that up and running, and we will play from the start. Okay, and we are on. Can you see the full screen?
No.
I'm sharing my screen.
It's frozen a little bit.
Bring your shared window to the front. Bring your shared window.
Put on play for the slideshow.
I do. I can see it, but it is saying sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to the front. Okay, let me just figure out why it's not. Give me a second, everyone.
While Leanne's doing that, I'll just tell you a bit about us. The idea came there. Oop, it was there. The idea for this talk came from the focus of council on the Dolime acquisition. So we thought it would be a good idea to talk about the background. And in 2007, Leanne published a story or an article in the Historical Society book about quarries and quarrymen in Guelph. And I took it and turned it into a walk for Jane's Walk. And so it seemed natural that we could talk about the heritage, the limestone heritage of Guelph, so that when City Council comes to discuss it, you'll have some idea that this is not a new story. Long, and that's what we wanted to share with you today.
Can everyone see the main page now?
You can see the screen that's going to show the next slide. So it's the split screen.
Yeah, try clicking swap displays.
Yeah.
You get it. There we go.
There. Okay.
There we go. Okay, you're on, Susan.
Okay, I did that. I did the explanation. So you can go to the next. So this is us, and we've been introduced, and that's the logos of our two groups. Leanne's with the Historical Society, and I'm with the Architectural Conservancy. So that's the basis of our heritage. So we want to tell you about about the limestone, why we use it, where the quarries are, and who were the best known quarrymen, stonemasons, and master masons who were involved in the development of these quarries. So that's our simple agenda.
So I'll talk a little bit about what is limestone. I mean, I am not a geologist, so it's not going to be a technical lecture. Limestone is a sedimentary rock. The reason limestone is so predominant in this area is that we are at the bottom of what was once an ancient sea. And limestone is composed primarily of marine organisms such as coral and mollusks and shells. And Guelph, little did John Galt know at the time, but it's situated on top of one of Southern Ontario's largest limestone deposits. It's actually known as the Guelph Formation. It's about a 30-kilometer wide swath that runs from Dundalk to Hamilton. But the Guelph part of the Guelph Formation is special. It's a dolomitic limestone. Not all dolomite is limestone, but dolomitic limestone has a high magnesium content, which gives Guelph's limestone a very distinct amber hue. If you look at limestone buildings in Kingston. They're a very brittle, gray, hard limestone. Also limestone, but a very different chemical composition. In Guelph, we have a nice, soft, amber-colored. It's great for carving. So our limestone buildings look very, very different. I know this slide is blurry, but the olive green portion in the center is the Guelph Formation. It gives you an idea of why that Guelph limestone is very geographically unique, and why Guelph is sitting right on top of that formation. That formation is important for more than just our architectural heritage. It's also the reason why we have such a wonderful, abundant, and high quality water supply. So you'll see to the left the depression that is marked with the Guelph Quarry. And you will see that there is a black line at the bottom of the quarry where what is called the Eramosa member, that layer of limestone that protects our wells, where the quarry is blasted through that layer. That is one of the reasons why what we call the Dolime quarry is so important to have properly rehabilitated, and why it is part of what is so important at a political level, because we need to make sure that nothing gets through, no chemical, no contaminants get through to the gas port layer, which is where our wells are. So you will see the black lines. That's how deep our wells go. And so anything that gets through to that blue layer will compromise our water supply. The limestone, the yellow layer that is quarried and is considered so perfect for building and for aggregate, is that Guelph Formation, that capstone, that really thick layer of limestone that's so perfect for building. Anything in the Eramosa member isn't really as good for building stone. It's really only the top 200 feet that is good for building stone. Everything below that is too hard, too brittle, and too dense. So it is mined for aggregate. So the Guelph Formation, this is a view from the largest quarry, the River Valley Developments, or the Dolime Quarry, and you can see the different layers of that Guelph Formation before it hits the Eramosa member below. So why Guelph limestone? Why do we love to build with stone in Guelph? Well, one of the reasons is in about 1894, I believe, 1854, most of the buildings in Guelph were frame. Why? Abundant timber supply, really. It's about the abundance and the ease of resources, and it was a lot easier to build in wood. So our buildings were all frame. Well, one day, all of Wyndham Street caught fire and pretty much burned most of Lower Wyndham, which was the commercial and business district at the time, burned it to the ground. And so at that point, more fire-resistant buildings, stone, began to define Guelph's character as a limestone city. It is the ideal building stone, a lot easier to cut than granite. Abundant supply, excellent for carving things like lintels and sills and different blocks of building stone. It has excellent thermal mass, keeps the building warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And limestone is also perfect for making the lime mortar that's necessary to build with stone. It's easily turned into lime with a lime kiln on site. You could actually create the mortar you need to build buildings. So building with limestone was logical for the city of Guelph, where it may not be in every area of the province or the country. We built everything with limestone after the 1860s, mills, houses, bridges, all home foundations, chimneys, lintels and sills, very decorative carvings. Some of our limestone buildings have excellent carving features, which Susan will talk about later. Lime is an abundant ingredient in the cement and the concrete and the making of Portland cement, which is used for modern buildings. And then most of all, aggregate in the roads. The quarrying industry in the 1940s boomed post-war as we built our transportation infrastructure throughout the province of Ontario. Most of the aggregate from to build the 401 in the 40s and the 50s came from the Guelph formation, much of it from the reformatory quarry, which we'll show you later.
Oh, so where they originally came from, this is a view of the river bed just behind the mall at the corner of Wellington and Gordon. And it's a good example of seeing the bedrock limestone. So that's where the first quarries were in the riverbed. And when people were building their houses, they could just go and dig in the garden, and there was the limestone right in their backyards. So it was exposed and they could see it. And the bedrock in Guelph is very close to the surface. And it's one of the reasons why we don't have a lot of underground parking lots in Guelph, because it would cost a fortune to blast out all of that limestone in the bedrock. So it's very close to the surface. And this part of the river is a good example of that. You can see exactly what the bedrock limestone looks like right there. Next.
Sorry.
You're the quick early.
Had it on the wrong button.
Your turn.
Okay, so after the river, quarries started popping up throughout the city. Wherever there was exposed surface limestone, as Susan mentioned, that's the easiest place to start a quarry. You don't want to have to dig too far down if it's just sitting right there on the surface. So we started to see very small quarries over in the ward where a lot of building was taking place. So there's a quarry lot on Huron Street in Ontario. There is a quarry lot that is where the Chemtura Uniroyal plant is. So this is an aerial shot from the 1950s. On the top left of the screen, you'll see the old Uniroyal plant. And over to the side of the third building to the right, you'll see a big open pond. That was the Birmingham quarry. That's now part of that property. It is fairly dried up right now, and there is a plan to use that for a stormwater management area when a new development, there is a development proposal currently for that site, and this old quarry will become part of the stormwater management. So that site is still visible today. We also have Guelph Sand and Gravel Company, or what we know as Lafarge. You see in the bottom right of that corner, that was quarried right up until the 1990s when it was decommissioned. So the subdivision that you see being built in the rest of the photo is Memorial Crescent, Ridgewood area off of Paisley Road. The reformatory quarry was along a ridge of exposed, a cliff of exposed limestone on the Ontario reformatory lands, close to Stone Road, and the railway was built. The Guelph Junction Railway goes through those lands. It was quite an extensive operation using prison labor. Those who were assigned or accommodated at the reformatory were mostly young men who had been sentenced to 2 years less a day for minor crimes. They were usually under the age of 30 and had short sentences. And the idea behind the reformatory movement in the early 1900s was that while they were at the reformatory, they would be reformed. And they were to learn a trade, whether it be farming or stonemasonry or quarrying, and they would leave the reformatory with employable skills. So all of the stone walls along York Road that we enjoy today, along the Haddadi Creek, were built by the prisoners from quarried rock on site. But because the reformatory was a provincially owned site, the labor was also used to supply aggregate for the building of the 401. So the rail cars would come along the Guelph Junction Railway and take the aggregate all the way out to Campbellville, where it would be used for road construction. This is the reformatory in 1969, and if you walk along the tracks, there is a trail along that area. So if you're on a walking tour outside of the route we're going to give you today, which is walkable within an hour, take a little bit of a longer walk along those tracks, and you will see that that quarry is still very much identifiable, but Mother Nature has reclaimed as much of it as possible. We also see close to the Dolime quarry today, a number of other quarries popping up and being owned by not just quarry owners, but the builders and the stonemasons that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And 3 of those are David Kennedy. He owned a site on Waterloo Avenue between Edinburgh Road and Meadowview Avenue. And there's an exposed ridge along the back of the Kennedy property that is ideal for quarrying building stone. And so that comprised most of his Waterloo Avenue quarry. He had other quarries. He had the Waterloo Avenue quarry. There's a picture from the 1960s of the quarry ridge along the back of the north side of Waterloo. And then a recent photo taken from the same angle of that same ridge of that old quarry. That photo is so recent, it was taken at 9 o'clock this morning.
In your backyard.
Yes. Kennedy also had a quarry on Metcalfe Street, and this is along Metcalfe and Aramasa, so close to where the Good Life and the Zares Plaza is. And that photo was from the 1970s, I believe, before those plazas were built. Bell's Quarry. Bell's Quarry was along Water Street next to the river. Again, exposed stone, easy. Why dig when it's right there, ready to be quarried at eye level? We'll talk a little bit more about Bell's Quarry a little bit later. Emsley's Quarry was located.
In that picture, Leanne.
What's that?
The configuration of the river. It's a wonderful map showing that we used to have 10 islands along the river between Gordon Street and where the Hanlon is now. That was just an aside, but it's a good sketch.
No, that's excellent, because we often hear of the channelization of the river and those banks being built up to channelize the river, and this kind of illustrates where that channelization happened. You'll see on Edinburgh Road that there's also 3 bridges. And that those 3 bridges were merged into the one Edinburgh Road bridge that we have today, but there is a very picturesque series of 3 bridges. As well in that map, and I'm glad you stopped and went back there, because there's a mill that is located along those 3 bridges, and that was Ferguson's mill. Long gone. Kind of disappeared during the channelization process and is now part of the Silver Creek Park. So Matthew Bell, again, along Water Street. We'll go back to that a little bit later with some more information. And then the 3rd quarry in this district was Emsley's Quarry. So there's actually an Emsley Street that runs off of Yorkshire. And this was the quarry of Robert Emsley. And Susan took a photo of this street marker showing the location of where Emsley had his quarry along Bristol Street. Again, in the same district, but just outside of this map, was Slater's Quarry. It was located around where 96 Essex Street is. There's a home at 96 Essex that was an old cider mill. And the quarry in the backyard supplied the stone for the building of the house. And a lot of other houses in that area also took stone from what was known at the time as Slater's Quarry. So we're going to go now to the biggest quarry of them all, what we call the Big Hole. And that is so many names. It goes by many names. The Big Hole, It was originally called the Guelph Quarry. It was referred to locally as Kennedy's Quarry as well. It was called Standard White Lime Quarry. It's been referred to in the historical record as the Priest's Quarry because the stone for the building of the Basilica of Our Lady came from the Priest's Quarry. It was called Dolime because it was purchased by DeFasco, the Dominion Foundry and Steel Company out of Hamilton, and it supplied primarily lime. So there was a lime kiln. They weren't quarrying it for building stone, they were quarrying it to put through a kiln, and the lime mortar was then, or the lime was used in the smelting industry, and it came to be known as Dolime. Although Dolime has not operated that site for many, many, many years, it was purchased by Carson Reed and branded under River Valley Developments. River Valley Developments is too many syllables, and we still call it Dolime today. But Dolime, so I'm going to call it for the purpose because everyone knows it as Dolime. I'm going to call it Dolime in this presentation as well. Dolime started to be quarried in 1856, at least in the historical record. That is the first record we have that a quarry was operating on that site. It was on the land of John C. Chadwick, and this was part of a survey that he was going to be building subdivisions. There is a Chadwick Street off close to Waterloo Avenue that was on his land, but he's marked on his survey where the quarry was located, and he's also indicated on this map that the quarry face was 23 feet high at that time. It's gone a lot deeper since then, obviously, but this is 1856. So when we talk about Dolime, it's time to close. It's time to close Dolime. When you've continuously operated a quarry for that length of time, I think it's safe to say, it's certainly, we've taken the resources out of that land and more. So in 1941, it was a full functioning lime kiln. This is in the DeFasco Dolime days, where it was primarily operating as a lime kiln. But even then, if you look at the quarry face on the left-hand side, it's not really that deep compared to today. I mean, it's gone a lot deeper, and as you saw in an earlier cross-section, it has gone below the Eramosa member through the water table. It is being dewatered. When a quarry is operating below the water table, it fills up with water. And although it's dry at the bottom right now, that is because it is being constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, pumped back out into the Speed River. When it is rehabilitated at some point in the future, dewatering will mean that the quarry will fill up, and we have to protect that compromised Eramosa member before that can happen. So who were Guelph's quarrymen? Well, there were a lot of them. Susan?
And we'd like to tell you that there were several sort of categories. This is from the 1847 census that shows us, if you look down a few lines, that there were 21 stonemasons in Guelph at that time. It was extremely labor-intensive work. So the quarrymen, or the stone cutters, were the laborers. And they were indeed all men at this time because it was extremely demanding work. The stonemasons and the master masons were a different category. The stonemasons were the ones that did the carving, and the master masons were almost the architects, the engineers for the building. They would draw up the building, they would make sure that it was going to be structurally sound, and they would plan where the limestone blocks were going to go. They were also the builders and the contractors, so that's why the quarries were named after them. The zenith of Guelph's Stone Age was from 1850 to 1880, and that's when a lot of our public buildings were built. The City Hall in 1856, the Basilica in 1872, the big estate homes like Caircaven. So those quarries drew enough stone to build those huge buildings that we have now. And just a reminder that after that time, stone buildings became sort of passé. And so when our Carnegie Library was built in 1911, it was not made of stone. Fry Colwell, the architect, developed this substance that was a kind of artificial stone, and it could be built at a quarter of the cost of a stone building. So people don't understand that the demolition of the library, the Carnegie Library, it was bad, of course, to lose a building like that, but it wasn't stone, and it was starting to leak and crumble, and it could not be repaired. And so there's the difference between our limestone buildings and our buildings that were made of fake limestone, if you wish. So the quarrymen were the ones who built the buildings that have lasted over the years that we'd like to tell you about. Next slide, Leanne. And one of the main ones was Matthew Bell. And this description of him came from the Dictionary of Canadian Architects. So even though he was not what we would call a certified architect, this is what indeed he was. And you can see the information about him. I live on Water Street. I live right close to where he lived, and I live close to his quarry. And the next slide will show you some of the pictures of his prominent buildings. The one on the right has the heads of Lord Palmerston carved on it. The central picture is the bull over the right-hand side of the City Hall. It has nothing to do with what goes on in council chambers, but marked the meat market that was down below it. The one on the lower left is on Albert Street, and above it is a close-up of the carving above its doorway, all very intricate. The one on the lower right, the tiny white house in the middle, was Matthew Bell's workshop, and it's still there today and being renovated. It's a kind of sideways to the street, so you have to kind of peek through between the two houses to see it. And the central one is the one that's perhaps most well known for his artistry, and that's the House of Heads on Water Street. I think we have a close-up. Oh no, we're going to talk about his death first. So his house, so we can go to the next one after that. So he also was beginning to do some of the carvings on the Church of Our Lady or the Basilica. If you look at this close-up picture, you'll see on the other side of the white statue, you'll see carved heads. And those were the heads that Matthew Bell was working on. Now, there are various stories about his death, but the one that makes the most sense, and the one that I like to tell when I take tours, is that he fell from a scaffolding when he was carving the heads into these corbels. And so the rest of the corbels around the chapels at the back of Church of Our Lady are left empty. And that is said to be a tribute to Matthew Bell. They didn't get someone else to carve them. So these are the only two heads that are on the basilica now. Okay.
Okay. A few other stonemasons who were very successful and proliferant in their business in the 1800s were George and Albert Pike. George was the father and Albert was the son. And the Pikes were from England, and they operated with Kennedy and with Emsley. So quite often when you see the history of a building, it'll say Pike and Emsley, or Kennedy and Pike, or Pike and Dobby. So quite often the various stonemasons and quarry owners would collaborate on projects, and they would bid for projects and join forces to build together. Robert Emsley, we've talked a little bit about his quarry along Bristol Street. Thomas Dobby was another quite successful stonemason, built quite a number of buildings that you would recognize in Guelph, and James Morrison were the other four. And I've just listed some of the buildings that all four of these stone masons were involved in building, everything from Chalmers Church to houses, the Alma Block on Wyndham Street, quite a number of other buildings throughout town, too numerous to list. But the one that we're going to focus on for this presentation is David Kennedy, because he was probably the most famous or successful of the many builders in town. He owned the largest quarry, and many of the buildings, including City Hall, are attributed to Kennedy's work. David Kennedy, Guelph was blessed actually with two David Kennedys, and they were two very different David Kennedys. And I think the reason that they sometimes get mixed up is because they were both very successful businessmen. And the one David Kennedy that was not a stonemason, his father, William Kennedy, was a stonemason, came from Ireland, and was a very successful builder in Ireland. He learned his craft building lighthouses in and around Ireland. And so he came to Canada with an excellent skill set to settle in the new city of Guelph. His son, David Johnston Kennedy, went on to be an artist, and is not the David Kennedy who became the quarry owner. So two David Kennedys in a very small city doing two very different things. Our David Kennedy was born in Falkirk, Stirlingshire, Scotland in 1826, and he was the eldest of 6 children. And he is still living in Scotland, in Denny, at the age of 22 in the Scottish census. So he's listed in that census, in the 1851 Scottish census, as a mason. So we know that he was learning, apprenticing, and working actively as a mason in 1851, still in Scotland. He came over to Canada by 1835, married Eliza Cumberland, and had 11 children with his wife. By 1861, he is living in Guelph, and presumably, we don't know that he's living on Waterloo Avenue. We know that his home on Waterloo Avenue was built around 1860s, late 1850s, so it's quite likely that he was living on Waterloo Avenue. And in the census, his neighbors are listed as the Sleemans. So again, that makes sense that he's living on Waterloo Avenue, because the only other the Sleemans were also living on Waterloo Avenue in that time period. So we're going to talk a little bit about his home in a bit as we go on our walking tour. His first wife, mother of his children, she died, and there was a bit of a local scandal. When he was widowed for a few years, he remarried in 1892. He remarried a young woman. He was 62 years old and she was 33, and her name was Emily Kennedy. And on the marriage register under bride's parents, it says unknown, but in brackets it says adopted by David Kennedy as a child. So he married his adopted daughter. I'll just leave it at that. So on the various census documents throughout David Kennedy's life, he's listed his occupation as a number of different things. I always find census records quite interesting as a historian, because census records were usually just a verbal record. A census taker would come to the door and ask a series of questions and write them in a book and go to the next address. It was a very door-to-door function to take a census. So the census taker would word for word record what the head of household told them was the information. So where were you born? Scotland. How old are you? 62. What's your religion? Presbyterian. So they would just record what was told to them. And so on different census records, Kennedy gives various occupations. So in 1851 in Scotland, he called himself a mason. On his son Robert's birth registration, where they do record father's occupation, he called himself a stonecutter. In 1871, he called himself a quarry owner. In 1891, he called himself a stone mason. And on his death certificate in 1893, he's listed as a contractor. So I think he saw himself as many different variations of a quarryman. He was also an architect of many houses, and so we're going to go have a look at some of his houses. And the way we're going to see some of the legacy of David Kennedy is we're going to start you on a walk. And as Susan said in the introduction, we wanted to take you on a walk as part of this presentation, but alas, we're going to go on a virtual walk. And we're going to start on Meadowview Avenue at Waterloo. David Kennedy's home on Meadowview was built in the late 1850s. I don't think there's an exact date. We don't know an exact date, Susan, or do you know more about the walking tour because you did the Doors Open. Do we have a definitive date, or do we just have a range?
No, it's hard to find one for this particular house. It was on Doors Open in 2016, and we're hoping that it'll be on again next year. So it's a beautiful house. You're looking at the side of it that faces Meadowview, and the house itself is on the top of the hill, and that porch looks down over the valley below.
Yeah. So Meadowview Avenue was named after what Kennedy called his home, which was Meadowview Park. And it faced down onto Waterloo, and the address would have been originally on Waterloo Avenue. So there's a picture of Meadowview Park, residence of David Kennedy. And in its former glory, its beautiful porch, its beautiful wraparound ornate porch, that picture would have been taken from Waterloo Avenue, and that would have been the front of the house. What you see now on the walking tour will be the side of the house. There's very distinctive feature over the windows, and those are stone, those are carved stone. And the function of those is as a drip mold. It was to run water off of the stone over the windows so that the water wouldn't land on the windowsills and compromise any of the masonry. Again, it just shows the skill that David Kennedy had as a residential home builder. So we're going to go down Waterloo Avenue. David Kennedy owned this whole block of land all the way out to Edinburgh Road. At 237 Waterloo, we have the home of William Kennedy, David's son. The quarry ridge of the Kennedy Quarry is still in the backyard today, and this home is being lovingly restored by a family who are working on it and have had it repointed recently. And at the top of the gable, I don't know if you can see it very well in the slideshow, but there's a close-up of the top of the gable, and there is often quarry stonemasons would add somewhere in their work either a mason's mark or some kind of marker. And so the marker at the top of that gable, if you're doing a walk by at a later date, if you look closely, it says William Kennedy, W.M. Kennedy. That was David Kennedy's son. A little further down, about 3 houses down, is 225 Waterloo Avenue. And that is the home of Robert Cumberland Kennedy, Cumberland being his mother's maiden name. It was built in 1880. It's a center hall plan. Originally, there was a stone summer kitchen at the back. I don't know when that was removed, probably around the 1930s, but old fire insurance maps show that there was another stone building out back. The original windows are still intact. And again, the quarry ridge at the back you saw a little bit earlier shows the remnants of Kennedy's quarry. So we're going to cross over to Waterloo, cross over Edinburgh Road on our walking tour, and we're going to end up on Bristol Street.
So this is, if you walk along Bristol Street between Edinburgh and Yorkshire, and just look to the left, you'll clearly see the back of the Emsley Quarry. You can see it's a beautiful feature in a backyard, and all along there are vines growing and flowers in the rock and everything like that. But that was the Emsley Quarry as we go along Bristol Street. Now, if we come around back on Water Street, if you come to the very end, the western end of Water Street, in front of our condominiums, Village on the Green, there's a walking trail. This used to be all covered with the forest. Unfortunately, hydro cut it down. But now you can see the remnants of Bell's Quarry in this outcropping of stone. And if you walk up close to it, you can see all of the layers. So you could actually slice off a piece, and it could be a big lintel for your house, or a piece of your ashlar front of your house. And so it's a nice example. So this is the remaining part of one remaining part of Bell's Quarry. If you follow the trail around, go down to the lower trail along the river and follow the footpath that goes through the woods that are there, and look to your right if you're heading east. This is what you'll see as the other part of Bell's Quarry. The picture on the right was just taken recently, but it's starting to fill in now with trees and weeds and that kind of thing. So it's a perfect example of seeing the remnants of a quarry. The picture on the left, the green picture, was taken in a time when it was spring. So it's a beautiful little spot in between the upper and lower trails that are right at the end of Water Street.
I love that picture on the left, Susan, the tree roots winding through the quarry, seeking water. Just illustrates, first of all, how seeking water and quarrying and water quality is so much part of that geological function of rock, but also shows that nature rehabilitates quarries when given an opportunity.
Yes. And if we continued along Water Street, we would see our beautiful Gow's Bridge. The picture on the left is taken from the bridge and shows you the date stone that was embedded in it. So you're looking towards Gordon Street, and you can see the limestone, the way it's built. This was built on the farm of Peter Gow, who had a tannery on the south side of Water Street. And also you can see in this picture the limestone walls that were built as a Depression area project in 1931. The city bought Gow's farm because of the flooding that was happening further up the river, notably the 1929 disastrous flood. And they were attempting to find a place to put garbage. So that part on the right on that wall is actually the walls of a garbage dump. And our beautiful park that's along there is built on top of garbage. So if you dug down a bit, you'd find old rusty cars. There's a lovely description in the newspaper of the rusty cars and the dead cats and the old refrigerators that are underneath there. So the city bought Peter Gow's farm as a dump. And then because of the flooding, they built the walls to hold back the river. And then of course the bridge in the right-hand picture, it's one of only 10 remaining limestone bridges in Ontario. If you go to St. Mary's, you can see 2 or 3 more of them. But we pay great homage to this bridge. And you can see where the canoeists, I always call this bridge the Eyes of Guelph, And if you stand by the pond at a certain time in the evening, you can see the bridge reflected so that it looks like eyes. So our beautiful bridge is a nice melding of the limestone. And if you listen to James Gordon's song, Happy Birthday to Gow's Bridge, he talks about the 100 years of the bridge's history. Now it's 125 years old almost. So it's a beautiful spot for us, and we hope the dam gates go down soon so we can have the pond back. Okay. And then if we carry on from the bridge and go up to Albert Street, this is one of Matthew Bell's houses, and this is the one that has the carving over the door. So you can see his work, ornate work around the door. And then we'll go along down to Water Street again to see the House of Heads. This is the one I mentioned before. Notice the carving on this building. The heads are beautifully drawn. Leanne, do we know who they are? Have we ever found out who those heads are?
I have always been told, and I believe I got that from a good source, which would have been Gil Stelter, is that they were family members.
Oh.
And that he used these carvings. Stone carvers could only really work in the summertime when they were on building projects in the summertime. So in the winter months, Matthew Bell in his workshop down on Albert Street would carve these types of things, or decorative lintels, or decorative drip molds, or the shamrock balls for the Church of Our Lady. He would do his stone carving during the winter months. And then this house was kind of his showpiece. He wanted to show potential clients what he could do. So he did some of those Gothic castellations, and he did a lot of the intricate work there was just to show off his wares as almost like a sales showroom.
And fortunately, the people who bought it recently have cleaned it nicely, and it looks quite good. Okay. Now we just wanted to remind you that Guelph limestone is beautiful, and as Leanne told you, it lasts for a long time, except never sandblast it to clean it or you'll have a pile of dust. But we have had some unfortunate losses over the years. The pictures that you're looking at are the pieces of the Mitchell farmhouse, which stood behind the present Costco. That was the Mitchell farm. And after a big battle in 2006, that led to the formation of our conservancy, one of the conditions for the demolition, Armel construction, was that all the pieces be saved. So they're shrink wrapped and they're preserved in Guelph's limestone graveyard. It's on Victoria Road. And if you have a house that's on the Heritage Register in Guelph, you can apply to get some limestone from that graveyard. The back, the elevator addition shaft on St. James's Church is from the graveyard. And several people have applied for limestone to help restore their houses. So it's a sad loss when we lose places like the Mitchell farmhouse and the Wilson farmhouse more recently, and you see a farmhouse is abandoned like the Crawley farmhouse that's kind of lost amongst the Tim Hortons warehouse on the Hanlon. But we have these pieces preserved to help with repairs. Okay.
It's a good thing that it's all shrink wrapped and protected, eh, Susan? So you mean you wouldn't want it to go bad or moldy?
No,
or
be knocked over or ruined.
At that property, there are the remains of about 20 different limestone buildings. So the city of Guelph has been collecting limestone from demolished properties for over 20 years since they acquired that property for wellhead protection. So there's plenty of building limestone to go around. One of the reasons why limestone is being stored here is that we're running out of the building stone, the amber hued building stone. Only the top layer, as we said before, only the top layer of that limestone, the Guelph Formation, is good building stone. The deeper you go, the more brittle and the darker the stone. So that if you were to get a piece of Guelph limestone to repair a heritage home from a operating quarry today, it wouldn't be that amber hued soft limestone. It would be a darker, denser stone. So having this this building stone in stock ensures that our heritage buildings, those that are designated or on the Heritage Register, will be modified, renovated using authentic heritage Guelph limestone and keeping that look that we, that aesthetic that we so value as part of our architectural heritage. So one of the reasons why we like to talk about quarries and limestone and our rich architectural heritage is that quarries are still part of our existence. There's lots of political, just even outside of Guelph, quarries are still being zoned and allowed for mining. They're still having an impact on our water supply. The rehabilitation of the Dolime quarry is an important part of our community's future. So we've put a link there for you to read more about the future of the Dolime quarry. And certainly, as you're walking around the city of Guelph, we've only covered just a few of the hundreds and hundreds of limestone buildings, and every single one of those buildings has a story to tell. And just a reminder that many of those beautiful buildings are gone. The Opera House is gone. The bank buildings are gone. One of the earliest buildings where Toronto Dominion Bank is downtown, one of the largest stone buildings ever built in Guelph in the 1850s, was demolished. So we've lost a lot of our limestone heritage. We're very fortunate that unlike many cities, we have restored and retained and preserved many of our limestone buildings, but we've also lost a lot of them along the way as well. Susan, any closing words?
No, we just wanted to let you know that if you have questions, you can ask them now if we have time, Heather, or you can come on one of the walks. I hope we'll be able to do the quarry walk in person in the future when walking together is allowed. I'd be happy to do it again in the fall, perhaps. And we want you to find out, because the awareness of our history is what we need to preserve our history. So that's part of the reason we wanted to tell you the story. So thank you for tuning in and listening. Heather, over to you.
Thanks, thanks, Leanne and Susan. Thank you very much. Super informative and such rich history communicated, and not dry at all, which is amazing. I was drinking it all in the entire time, and like, how many times can you say that about an hour-long lecture about quarries? But you've managed it. So if anyone, we're at time, but I don't see why we can't take, about 5 minutes to ask some questions if you have any. So I would encourage you to put those into the chat box, and then I'll read them aloud and make sure that they get answered. So Beth has asked, how will the Dolime quarry be rehabilitated?
I don't mind taking that one. I'm just going to move my computer a little bit because I see that the sun is streaming through the window and I don't have curtains. The plan is, it's owned by a local developer, Carson Reed, and the intent is that he will redevelop the property for a mixed use, primarily residential development. The first step is to ensure that the Eramosa member is protected, to ensure wellhead protection. So that will involve a negotiated solution. The Ministry of the Environment is very much a part of that decision. The exposed area would be capped with a protective layer to kind of fill in what was compromised during the quarrying operation. And then it would be allowed to slowly fill up with water, perhaps a live by the lake community. If you've ever been out to the corner of the Hanlon Expressway and the road, I think it's Regional Road 34 leading to Aberfoyle, there's a community out there called Heritage Lake. And that's a former quarry. That is a quarry that was filled in, it was mined for aggregate, and then allowed to fill back up, and they built houses around a private lake. I'm not suggesting that that's what the development would look like at the Dolime quarry, but again, it just shows you that kind of, it'll create a lake environment once the quarry fills with water. One thing I wanted to point out is the Dolime quarry, although always associated with the city of Guelph and David Kennedy and building of the basilica, is actually not in the city of Guelph. It is in Guelph-Aramasa Township. It is not in the city limits. So some of those decisions that are being made are being proposed by the city of Guelph, but it's not actually within the city limits. It would be anticipated that if a development were to be approved there, that developer would want access to city services like water and wastewater services. So that would be, again, part of the negotiated solution would be bringing those lands into the city boundary. A lot of that information is available online. Just go to the city of Guelph, guelph.ca, and type Dolime into the subject area, and you'll get a whole bunch of background reports and hydrogeological reports and fluvial geomorphology reports. You could spend the whole beautiful weekend ahead reading technical studies on the Dolime quarry, but it is a very technical decision to make sure that our water supply is protected.
Any other questions? I guess before I get you to sign off, if anyone, just give people a time to add a question if they have any. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario and what the Guelph Wellington branch is up to these days?
It's a group that was founded in 1933, founded for the purpose of preserving heritage buildings. And now we're also including heritage landscapes. So our role is to educate about heritage, which is what we're doing here, and advocate for preservation. And so part of our role is to make people aware of our heritage and our buildings and the stories behind it, so that we can then advocate for keeping it. So I was working in the last month on a virtual walking tour of Catholic Hill, for example. So it's a fine example of the Basilica, which is a National Heritage Site. And our branch was founded to preserve the Loreto Convent, which was threatened with demolition. And so that's what we try and do, is run workshops. They aren't running now, of course. And also advocate with people like Leanne and the rest of City Council to save buildings. So we're working right now to save some of the farmhouses in the Clare Maltby area and some of the terrain that surrounds them. You can join us at arconserve.ca. There are 25 branches in Ontario and other towns.
Okay. And I'll say a little bit about the Guelph Historical Society. It was founded in 1961. Although it has a similar mandate to the ACO, the focus is on the storytelling. The ACO primarily about architectural and landscapes, and the Guelph Historical Society about telling the story of the whole city. So the story of David Kennedy, the story of the quarrying industry. We have monthly lectures about a variety of different topics, everything from brewing and malting to, I think we had one on body houses, and prostitution back in March, which was one of our more interesting lectures, and telling the stories of the people who built the city of Guelph. The Historical Society has a website, Guelph Historical Society, all one word, .ca. You can purchase a membership online, and as part of a membership, you get our annual publication, which is called Historic Guelph. It's a nice booklet of all these stories that we've collected. The latest issue just came out, which I'm going to grab, and the cover story is William Weingard. So it's 86 pages. It's a history of Douglas Street and Guelph orchestras, and that you get that annual publication as part of your membership. You can actually
write for it. You can submit essays for it too.
Absolutely. That's how the Quarry article got started. It was an essay contest that I submitted that research. And the memberships are available on the website online, so you don't even have to leave the comfort of your home to become a member of the Guelph Historical Society. Just go onto the website, and nonprofit organizations in the city really need the support of our citizens. There's so much good work that's being done by volunteers, and the only way that that's possible is to support organizations like the Architectural Conservancy and the Historical Society. If you care about Guelph's heritage, because those are the drum bangers and the rally criers who are making things happen in this city when our stone, our limestone, or our cultural heritage is being threatened.
And the Guelph Arts Council that sponsors the walking tours and Doors Open Guelph. So those are also ways to make people aware of our city's heritage. We got our commercials in, didn't we?
Right. And the 2Rivers Festival. Thank you for this opportunity, because both of our organizations have a mandate to educate and celebrate. And that is what we do with the 2Rivers Festival. So we're happy to partner with you to deliver this, this talk tonight. Thanks for inviting us.
Of course. Thank you both for joining us and providing such wonderful information and more information about your organizations. They're two that I wasn't super familiar as a relative newcomer to Guelph, so it was wonderful to learn more. So I guess with that, I will say thank you once again to Susan and Leanne, as well as everyone who showed up on this beautiful evening to learn more about the Quarry story. And I welcome you all to go on that walk and adore and appreciate all of those lovely stone buildings that we have in Guelph. I've noticed the one with all of the heads before, and it is absolutely phenomenal. So we have much to appreciate along our rivers, as well as kind of the abundant architectural legacy within Guelph. So thank you very much. And I would like you to invite you to the rest of our events, and a good evening.